What crime could be so vile that the Romans believed mere death was not enough? In the depths of Roman law, one punishment stood apart in its calculated brutality: the Poena Cullei, a penalty reserved for a crime the Romans considered among the most unnatural and corrosive to their society: parricide, the murder of one's own parent. Not treason, not rebellion, but the slaying of a father or mother. In Roman eyes, this was not only a crime against the family, but an assault on the very fabric of civilization. The legal roots of this punishment can be traced to the Lex Pompeia de parricidiis, implemented in the late Roman Republic under Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, better known as Pompey the Great. Though earlier references to the practice exist, it was during the late Republic, possibly under Pompey, that the Poena Cullei became more formally established. It reflected a deep Roman reverence for the paterfamilias, the male head of the household, who was seen as the guardian of Roman moral order. Unlike most Roman executions, which were often swift or militarily expedient, the Poena Cullei was symbolic. It was designed not just to kill, but to erase the criminal from the world. The condemned was to be sewn inside a leather sack, culleus, with a terrifying selection of animals, then cast into a river. It was not only a method of death, but a form of total social and spiritual annihilation, denying the killer even the dignity of burial or the earth's embrace. This punishment sends a chilling message across millennia. For ancient Rome, some crimes demanded more than justice. They demanded obliteration. Symbolic beasts of death, the animals chosen for the sack. Why would Rome choose animals to share the sack with a murderer? The Poena Cullei was not merely an execution, it was a ritual of symbolic destruction. Every element was chosen to reflect the unnatural horror of parricide. And nothing embodied that more grotesquely than the animals sewn into the sack alongside the condemned. These were not arbitrary creatures. Each one bore a symbolic weight in Roman culture, intended to heighten the disgrace and spiritual pollution of the crime. According to recorded legal sources from the early empire, particularly those preserved in the Digest of Justinian, the most common combination included a dog, a snake, a monkey, and a rooster. Earlier versions, such as those from the late Republic, sometimes substituted different beasts depending on availability or interpretation. But their purpose remained consistent. They were chosen for what they represented. The dog, though often loyal, was in Roman eyes also associated with impurity and scavenging. To be confined with a howling, frenzied dog emphasized the dishonor of the criminal, chained not to man, but to a creature that fed on death. The snake, cold and treacherous, was a natural symbol of betrayal. Roman poets and philosophers often linked it to treason and moral corruption. Pliny the Elder described serpents as creatures of eternal deceit. No companion could more appropriately reflect the act of murdering one's own kin. The monkey, rare in Rome, was not amusing but unsettling, seen as a grotesque imitation of man. It represented perverted nature, a parody of humanity. To be enclosed with such a beast was to be denied human status entirely. The rooster, especially the black variety, symbolized chaos and the unknown. Romans associated it with sacrifice and omens. In this context, its frantic crowing in the dark sack may have been interpreted as a final herald of doom, the last cry before obliteration. Together, these animals created an image not just of terror, but of cosmic disorder. The sack became a twisted parody of the womb. Rather than birth, it delivered the condemned into an abyss of disgrace, stripped of family, society, and identity. The river would not cleanse, it would erase. In this brutal symbolism, we see how Rome confronted what it feared most, not just death, but the breakdown of the sacred order of family and state. Inside the ritual, how Poena Cullei was carried out. The process unfolded with cold precision, a civic spectacle designed to both terrify and instruct. According to Roman legal compilations, such as the Digest of Justinian and accounts by jurists like Modestinus and Paulus, every step was meant to humiliate, isolate, and dehumanize the parricide. First, the criminal was scourged with rods, a customary Roman prelude to capital punishment that reinforced state authority and public shame. This was not an impulsive outburst of violence, but a methodical stripping away of civic status. The parricide, now no longer protected by Roman law or ritual, was reduced to an object of contempt. Then came the preparation of the sack, the cullei. Crafted from strong leather, it was large enough to hold the man and his non-human companions. Before being sealed inside, the executioners would often tie the criminal's limbs to restrict movement. He was then sewn inside the sack with the carefully chosen beasts, typically a dog, a snake, a monkey, and a rooster. Some regional records substitute other animals, but the symbolism remained intact: chaos, impurity, and betrayal surrounding the killer. The sack, heavy with life and fear, was then taken to the nearest large body of water, most often the Tiber River in Rome, but in provinces other rivers were used. Importantly, the method of drowning was not just practical. It served a deeper Roman purpose: denial of burial. To a Roman, this was a fate worse than death. Without a grave, there could be no proper funerary rites, no transition to the afterlife, no remembrance. The criminal was denied both body and legacy. As the sack plunged into the river, the outcome inside was left to chance and terror. The animals, trapped in darkness and panic, likely attacked each other and the man indiscriminately. There was no controlled end, just a slow, suffocating descent into water, noise, and madness. The horror of the Poena Cullei was never just in the killing, it was in what it meant. This was not justice by sword or fire. This was total annihilation. A parricide did not merely die, he ceased to exist, devoured by the symbols of chaos, condemned without tomb, and lost to the currents of time. The fall of Poena Cullei, when Rome ended the sack execution. What made even the Romans, no strangers to brutality, abandon one of their most terrifying punishments? For centuries, Poena Cullei stood as the Roman Republic and later Empire's most distinct form of capital punishment. But even in a civilization steeped in blood sport and public execution, there came a point when this method was viewed as archaic, excessive, and ultimately obsolete. By the late 3rd century CE, Poena Cullei began to disappear from widespread enforcement. The reasons were multiple, but central among them was the slow transformation of Roman legal and moral values under the influence of Christianity. As the empire transitioned into the era of Christian emperors, beginning notably with Constantine the Great in the early 4th century, traditional Roman punishments rooted in symbolism and pagan ritual began to fade. In fact, we see the practice revived briefly under Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century CE, suggesting it had already fallen into irregular use even before Constantine. Hadrian, known for his legal reforms, reportedly restored the punishment not out of cruelty, but in an attempt to reassert traditional Roman authority over moral order. Still, it was clear by this point that its use was sporadic. The final legal reference to the Poena Cullei appears in the Codex Justinianus, compiled under Emperor Justinian the Font in the 6th century CE. There, it is mentioned as a theoretical punishment, an echo of Rome's older laws, but no longer enforced. Execution for parricide had by then shifted to simpler, more direct methods such as beheading or burning, often without the elaborate rituals. By the end of late antiquity, Poena Cullei had become a relic, too ritualistic for a Christian empire, too obscure for evolving law codes. It lingered in legal memory, but not in practice. The Poena Cullei was more than execution. It was Rome's most severe condemnation of a crime they saw as unnatural, the murder of one's own parent. Through this punishment, the Romans revealed the depth of their belief in order, blood, and ancestral sanctity. Its horror reflected the weight they placed on family as the foundation of the state. What does such a ritual tell us about Rome's vision of justice and moral collapse? Comment below. Can law preserve order without invoking fear? As the digest states, in no other crime is nature so violated as in parricide.